That was, now, that was what went on at the White House. And I tell people a lot of times, I'm glad I did it. I spent those 4 years there, but I won't do it again. Every day is dog eat dog. It goes on every day. Many times I have threats made at the policy meetings. We're going to get you. Good. Get me. Let's see if you get who gets who first. I had asked, they thought they had destroyed the security files, but they hadn't. Special intelligence of the Army had copies of all of them. One of these men would threaten me. I'd call the Pentagon. Courier would deliver the files to me. Example, one day, one of these men was talking. He was pontificating. So I interrupted. Can I say something? And I was chairman of the policy group. He said, yes. What is it? You know, I'm very interested in what you're saying, because last night I read a book that sort of followed what you're saying. He said, you did? Yes. You know what the name of the book was? He said, what? Karl Marx. I think if he had a gun, he'd have shot me. He changed colors and everything, because he knew what I meant. I called him that label I put on him. Then I called CIA, the deputy director. I told him, don't send any of these Marxists to me anymore. I'll chase them out of my committee. I told him, send me Americans. You got a lot of them over there. Send me Americans, not these Marxist people. I don't like them. I don't want them near here. You shouldn't say that, he said. I told him, I am saying it. You send those Marxists to me, I'll put them out. They won't, I have the authority to put them off of the committee. You won't be represented. So you better send me Americans. From then on, they were sending pretty good men over. But now this went on every day. When I would call on the files, one particular man, I remember, he was talking and talking and talking. So finally I said, you know, Hitler was not a bad guy. He turned white. He knew I'd read his security file where he said that. And then I'd go out to security, and I knew the people real well. We suspended about a dozen of them. Number 2 on McCarthy's list, I finally got him, and he vowed he was going to get me. And he was suspended and fired from State Department. Nobody knew about this. It wasn't done like McCarthy did it. It was all done behind the scenes. So the White House job wasn't as rosy as people think it was. This infighting went on constantly. But I'm glad I went through it for the 4 years. I used to tell my wife that she'd see me go in the morning, and she'd say, what are you going to do today, Phil? Save the world? I'd laugh at her. I'd go, well, she said, remember, maybe the world doesn't want to be saved. I thought, well, maybe you're right. And my wife used to say that to me. Oh. And it was true. A lot of the things I saw and happened, I figured, well, maybe the world doesn't want to be saved. And we were deteriorating. We were going downhill. We were favoring the communists every way you can think. We offered them at the Department of Commerce, a lot of our commerce, a lot of our secrets, free of charge. This group was oriented that way. So you see, what was happening in our own government. Now, I always tell people, inside this part of the government, you can see out, but the people cannot see in what's going on in there, because everything had a classification on it. I personally had 9 clearances in addition to top secret. So you know how many stupid clearances were around that you couldn't talk about. Clearance after clearance, every place you went, you'd run up against this. This was done purposely. So the people that really controlled the government, their actions were hidden. A lot of these clearances were hopeless, no good. I went up took a lie detector test on the top floor of the Pentagon, and I came down. General said, "What'd you do, Phil?" I told him, "I thought I was in jail. They closed 2 jail gates around me and put me in this room and interrogated me with a lot of questions." I told him, "What goes on, General, with that outfit?" He said, "Well, did they clear you?" "I don't know, General." "Well, I got cleared, and that brought 2 other clearances with it, even a satellite clearance in those days." So the classification system was bad. And that classification system also was applied to UFOs, things you couldn't talk about. So why? I ran across things that were classified, highly classified, and I used to say, "What's this classified for? To keep it from American people? The communists know all about this. Who are we keeping it from? Enemy or our own people?" They didn't care. They actually hid it. And you'd be surprised how many times this happened. Now, that was a shadow government. So, you see, this battle went on every day. I don't tend to tell you that all the people on my side fought this battle and got out unscathed. They didn't. A lot of good people got hurt in this fight. It was almost like a war within a war. A lot of my friends were suspended on phony charges. And this happened quite often. So this is a war that you never see. One of my books that I just wrote is titled "The Top Secret War Within the Government." And this went on every day. Now, you can see when I tell you these things, the UFO material was of little consequence in these terms. But it also fell in that area and was hidden from all of you. They didn't want anybody to know these things. They could use as a weapon and scare you when they wanted to. And this is not that I say they. I gave the committee every one of their names. That's why I go back and I told them the first time in my life that I had the good Lord answer my prayer in a hurry. He'd never done that for me before. But it happened that time. And I figured, well, maybe there's somebody after all on my side. But we finally whipped them. Now I think it's a lot better. Of course, a lot of times I got to question what people like Clinton and some around him do. But it's not the way it was before. A lot of those people have lost their authority and their positions. They're not around anymore. A lot of my friends aren't around anymore. So it happened. So the Borgias used to throw people in the Tiber River. There were some bodies found in the Tiber River in Washington. You never heard about them, but there were. And maybe the makeup I had, I loved this type of fight. And I think I thrived on it. I loved the challenge from them. When they used to tell me we were going to get you, oh, that was not fun. I told them, good, let's see who gets who. They had nothing on me. I had confidential funds for the Army, destroy my vouchers every 3 months, and I'm proud to say, never did a penny stick to my hand that wasn't mine. I accounted for every penny. My CIC, I used to give them their funds. The general told me one time, we know who to trust. That was part of, I think, my strength. They couldn't get anything on me. CIA, one time, a friend of mine said, a man like you surely has a stash hidden away. CIA is looking for it. I told them, good. Tell them when they find it to let me know so I can go get it. Because I don't know where it is. The Chicago Tribune interviewed me and wrote part of this story, the whole page way back in the 50s. And it was printed actually the Tribune. The Washington representative was a good friend of mine, and he interviewed me. And he put in there that when I retired, my bank account showed less than $200, and I had 2 children sent to school, and nothing saved. because Washington is an expensive city to live in. For example, when they assigned me to the White House, I had no civilian clothes. I'd been in the Army all these years. I'd been in the Army by then over 10 years, 12. I had no civilian clothes. They called me in one day and said, Phil, we hate to say this, you can't wear a uniform or you have to wear civilian clothes. I think I had about $300 in the bank. I had to go spend it all to get civilian clothes to wear at the White House, because we didn't wear a uniform there most of the time. So that from outside it couldn't be distinguished who was military and who wasn't. So those 4 years I never wore my uniform. Once in a while I'd put it on. And I used to discuss this with a lot of congressmen, because we had a lot of good senators in those days and a lot of good congressmen. And in the book, there is this Russian, Fedai. He was at the Library of Congress, a good friend of mine. And he and I used to give lectures. We gave a lecture to the board of directors of Gulf Oil, to Standard Oil. And what we would do, he would take the part of the Communist Politburo, and I would take the part of the U.S. Politburo. And we'd challenge each other. And they loved that, you know, because we would actually quote real policy, real Soviet policy, real U.S. policy, and show how it dovetailed. They were actually working together. That's why in the book a lot of times I say that the KGB was controlling a lot of that. They were buddies. When I was in Rome and I started to rest, in those days it was known as the NKVD. General called me in one day, telegram came from Washington that I would quit arresting the communist agents because we weren't at war with them. Yet they were agitating constantly to destroy us. So I told the general, he got angry, he was an ex-paratrooper. Dasher was his name. I told him, General Dasher, I won't disobey orders, but sure in hell I'm going to stretch them. So what I did, I kept arresting them. As they'd come into Rome, I'd pick them up. Because my fiscal agents and all, and the secret police knew every time they came here. I would arrest them, I'd put them in my prison, interrogate them, work them over a little bit, spread the word on the underground that I had them, and they sung like canaries. Then we turned them loose. I never picked up the same man twice. They would get rid of them immediately. When I found out I actually had them in jail and then we interrogated them and got everything out of them. So I didn't disobey orders, but I stretched it a lot, and they quit coming in. So we stopped all agitation. And I got rid of the Gestapo, SS there. So in the last year I had it pretty nice in Rome. I didn't know how I did it, but I did it some way. Because I told Pope Paul, I challenge your Lord and mine. Because I told him, what would he do, put me here as a joke? This is his eternal city, not mine. I told him, I don't know what to do, but I'll give you your city back better than it ever was. And we did. I had 60 counterintelligence agents, a lot of them were ex-FBI. I had 30 British field security agents. I had a 10 police detachment and 12 custom guards. And they were good men. We cleaned that city up. I gave my men orders one day, and if Washington had found this out, I think they'd have hung me. My orders were to my men, you tap a Gestapo killer or an SS or KGB in the back of the head with your gun, you count 3. At 3, if he doesn't have his hands up, you blow his damn head off. Because at 4, he got his gun out and you're dead. I don't want any of you killed. I didn't lose one. I arrested 2 Gestapo colonels one day. And I told them, You were armed, why didn't you resist? They said, the moment we got the tap on the back, we realized the streets were deserted, you had us. And we put our hands up. We knew about your 3-second rule. Now, these were killers. Look what they did. And I figured, they're animals? Well, Chief of Police of Italy and the Prime Minister told me one time, this is not play. These are the drugs. You can't show sign of, being nice to them is a sign of weakness. You can't afford that. They'll blow your head off. If you believe in fair play, you better go home now. They were right. You couldn't play fair with these people. So I played the game like they did. Maybe I'll have to pay for that someday. But my job was to destroy them. They were killers. They were animals. And this Gestapo colonel said, how many guns did you have on us? 20. There was guns, rifles in each window. I told them there were agents on every corner. They said, we thought so, because the moment we got the tap on the back, we realized the streets were deserted, you had us. There wasn't a civilian or anybody on the street, we cleaned them all out, because we figured there'd be shooting. So this is one of the stories of the Gestapo in Rome. Now, and then I came back to Washington, and I'm fighting a similar battle. But there was a difference. I couldn't use a gun and a knife anymore. I figured, isn't it a pity? I got to fight these people almost by word of mouth now, and threats and security. Over there was different. I told even Pope Paul one day, I told him, I can't come in the Vatican, but up to your walls, I'm in charge. So whether you like it or not, you're under my protection. I even told Pope Pius this. I was called 3 times by Pope Pius, and one day my liaison officer told me, he said, I told him, well, how's come, this is my 3rd visit to Pope Pius, how's come he always tells me the same thing? Asked me about my liaison officer said, why, you stupid Americans. He said, anybody in the world would give anything to meet a pope like you do one-on-one, just you two. I told him, well, Mario, maybe you're right. We are hicks yet. And I wrote in my latest book when I was writing about the extraterrestrial, and I put in that, 3 times I had the honor of meeting Pope Pius. I dealt with Pope Paul once a week. He was acting Secretary of State at the time. His name was Monsignor Mottini. I used to deal with him at least once a week. And I figured I'd be foolish to say they didn't influence me in my beliefs, because they did, meeting people like that. So this is some of the things I learned in Rome, and I came home and the war didn't end. So that's, everybody says, oh, Jesus, you were at the White House. What a high position. I told them, don't wish that on anybody. Look what goes on now, even the White House aides and things. Well, I didn't mean it that way. You women are laughing. That wasn't the way we fought the battles in those days. Anyway, my wife would have hit me on the head. Yeah, she passed away a couple of years ago. We were married 53 years. So this is the story. I hope I got it. This story, by the way, you won't see it in any books or magazines. It was never written, because unless you're a part of it, you didn't even know what was going on. Everybody every day go about their business. Nobody knew that this inside battle was destroying people, destroying characters and everything constantly. So that's the story of the shadow government. And now I look back, I'm glad I went through it, but I won't do it again if I had my say. Now let's go back to the UFOs.
I think we have time for one more question. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. Next question. We've got time.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for being a real American hero. They're rare.
I didn't get that. Oh.
You have addressed the enormous budgets of the various alphabet soups of agencies in this country, as well as the different branches of the military. It seems perhaps there is both the covert things that are done and the overt things that are done. Could you address this in light of some of the information we've heard in regard to underground bases, joint treaties with extraterrestrial civilizations, and how that might tie into the Philadelphia experiment and Montauk experiments?
Other nations. What do you say?
It's a good question.
Could you repeat that last part?
Could you address, from what you know personally, the potential of underground bases and cities and treaties with extraterrestrial civilizations, as well exchanges of technology, and how that fits into the Philadelphia experiments and Montauk experiments?
Underground bases, Area 51, Montauk, and the Philadelphia.
Yeah, okay. I'll answer that the best I can. In my opinion, because I knew what was going on there, Area 51 is greatly exaggerated what you read in the books and newspapers. Yes, we kept a lot of our projects secret, which we should. A lot of the B-2 was made, the stealth there. But what they say, the aliens there and meeting here and meeting, that's not so. As far as Philadelphia experiment, I had the privilege of knowing personally and discussing this with Admiral Arleigh Burke. He was Chief of Staff at the time. Arleigh Burke was known as the Pacific as the destroyer commander. And I discussed the Philadelphia experiment with him. It happened, but one serious thing happened. When they turned on the degaussers, the purpose was to move the ships away from mines sunk into the ocean, magnetic mines. When they turned the degaussers on, they turned 4 of them on. The ship did disappear and changed over. Tesla, in the early 90s, had conducted similar experiments. He was making things disappear from tables and moving over here, and when he'd take the energy away from it, they'd go back. But one mistake they made, they never figured they'd kill the crew, too. Those experiments killed the crews. Dangerous. Just like I told you about the lasers. We had to watch the laser weapons. They could blind our own men. When you do that, you got troubles. Montauk was part of that. There was some work done in Montauk. That was when I talk about von Neumann, his area. The crystal valve he talks about. That was really the transistor we talk about. And to add on to what you asked, the underground bases, at least I'd say better than 90% fabrication. They don't exist. The only one I know exists was a mountain in Virginia where we're going to move the government in case of a nuclear attack. On the Arctic, no such thing. And I think I would have known. I had access to about everything. I could call any reports at the White House that I needed and wanted. And if they existed, I think I'd have got some indication. At least one report. I never got any. So in my opinion, known with my experience and what I've seen and what I knew and the people I knew, how's come all these intelligent people never heard of them either? It couldn't be hidden from us. It could be hidden from somebody who wasn't cleared and not in the loop. They don't exist. These are fabrications. One man came to see me one time and he insisted there were bases in the Arctic, down south. And well, I did something to him, he got scared off, I never saw him again. There were no bases there. And I couldn't have been in an area where I never saw. I was right in where the people would know. And not only that, in other services. I had good friends in intelligence and clearances like that. We used to talk about it. It wouldn't have been the Navy, it wouldn't have been the Air Force or anybody. They weren't there. Montauk was real. There was some things happened there way back. There was talk it came from flying saucers. I went up to the Montauk area one day and I was taken to a building 7 stories high, solid concrete. This building was filled with computers and tubes 3 and 4 feet high. Temperature every day 72 degrees. If the temperature fell, it would destroy everything in there. They had to keep it constant. Now that entire building, one little wee computer on a watch can do more than that building used to do. That's how far we advanced. So there were installations like that around, which were subject to a lot of exaggeration, what they really did. Because you couldn't enter that building if you didn't have the clearances. So the legend spreads. The mystery spreads. And people like mysteries and legends. No, I don't know if any existed. If I did, I'd tell you. I never saw reports. It's just like I told you today on the EB report that he was 200 years old. One report I had. I can't verify that that was true. You can't go with one report. You can keep it in mind if something else matches. Just like I told you when I saw the extraterrestrial in Fort Riley. I put it in the back of my head until I could verify and corroborate it, which I did 10 years later. You see, you have to think of things like that. And the trained intelligence officer works like that. So I don't blame a lot of people for getting confused because these stories are made up and they sound so real. And you almost figure it has to be. It sounds real. It's not. Just like I told you my co-writer, when I answered him, quit watching X-Files and don't bother me anymore with such questions. Those files in the basement don't exist. They never have. It isn't like that. So he was quoting, wanting me to answer questions from fiction and put them in the book. Well, we never did because I warned him about that. So it's just like these movies that you see, Star Wars and these other movies. They're based on some fact. Yes, they are, but a small percentage. Then the writers take over and the producers and all, and the prop people, and they make it look real. And they're entertaining. I watch some of them. But they're entertaining, but it's not reality. I wish we were that good. We're not. And like I say, the mistake, and we have to do this, we have to take this on as a new science. Forget NASA and let them do what they want. Let them spend the money if we can afford it. But the new science has to be created, and this has to come from the same way we pulled it up. And we just did a small part. We didn't do a big, great.
Thank you.
We did do some advances, but not as much as we should have done. Of course, a lot of people say that's hindsight. Yes. And also another thing to remember, ladies and gentlemen, I had the title of Chief of Foreign Technology Division. But that was a secondary job for me. That wasn't my main job. And people can understand that something so important and that wasn't your only job? And no, it wasn't. I had to attend hearings, I had to prepare budgets, I had to visit industries. The UFO as chief of foreign was only one part of my duties. I had so many other things to do. The general made me project officer of the anti-missile missile. And he told me, don't say you're too busy. You're going to do it anyway. And then when you get it started, recommend somebody take your place. So I had a lot of those things on hand. So I tell people, don't ever imagine that this UFO artifacts that I was working on is in the book. That wasn't my primary job. I didn't spend I spent maybe not even half of my time on that. So you see the way the military operates. Sometimes the budget was so important that I had to forget all about UFOs. Because without a budget, we didn't operate. I had to appear in front of Congress. And ladies and gentlemen, I won't wish that anybody to go up at a hearing in front of the Senate and Congress. You don't know what you're up against. You get in there and you figure, my God, what am I doing here? How can these people be so damn dumb? But it's part of the world and you have to live with it. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody to go up there. My friends became generals, and they used to hate the budget and go up on Capitol Hill and testify to prove their budget. So what they do, the Department of Defense was smart. They made the books on the budget so damn thick and complicated that nobody could figure out what they wanted. I used to go up and see budget hearings, books this thick. Well, who can read them? I'm sure some of those senators and congressmen didn't. They were too busy getting elected all the time and raising funds. So that's a reality of the government. And I say this with regret that that was not even my primary job. Now, when you read the book, you figure, Jesus, he did a fine job, or people say you had courage. There was no courage to it. That wasn't my primary operation. It was important, yes. And now when I look back, maybe that was the most important thing I did. I wish I could have put more time in it. I wish I could have corrected some of the mistakes I made. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I told you about the little piece of metal I had. That piece of metal was paper thin. So the general called me in one day and he said, Phil, got a project and you're going to be the head of it. And he handed me this piece of metal. He said, this is bigger than Los Alamos, the atomic bomb thing. He said, this piece of metal is atomically aligned, paper thin, so strong, we make spaceships light as a feather. Radiation, space debris can't penetrate them. So he gave me that job. Pick any engineers you want. If you find any industry that's even working in that direction, finance them. I never found one. Even the German scientists were with me, von Braun's people. We never found any. We failed. Now, that was an important project. It would have made all our weapons obsolete. If you have an automobile, it would last a lifetime. Now they're starting the line now. And when you line the atoms, and Lincoln Labs reported this, and you turn those atoms this way, it becomes transparent. Now science is working on it and doing it. They use yttrium, one of the rare earths. The material is solid. They treat it with some chemicals, and it turns transparent. Take the treatment away, it goes back to its normal state. That's going on now. Science has actually advanced that far since my day. But the thing that bothers me is on the transistors integrated circuit, I think we've reached the end of the line. And I hope that they give us another one to work with, because it might take 200 years to reach this point if we don't have them.
Colonel, let's take another question.
Thank you very much, Colonel. I enjoy your candor. The question I have is a little bit off the track. Every 33 years, the Earth passes through a dust cloud in our solar system, and we receive a lot of material into the atmosphere, many meteorites and so forth. This is, apparently it's going to occur in November of 1998 again, and it would place the last time it occurred about 1965, when you were in your heaviest involvement, I would guess, with the military, with technologies that would be very sensitive to these types of interferences and the dust that was created. Do you have any experience with that? Did you find that?
Well, I didn't get close to that. I think it's hearing aid of mine.
He's talking about a dust cloud that the Earth passes into what year?
Every 33 years, so 1965 would have been the last time we passed through it.
65 was the last time when you were working on
Yes.
this.
No, I have to be honest, I don't know anything about it. I left the Army, I retired in '63. And I became at the time the Washington representative of a big firm. So I didn't get involved in a lot of that for those first 2 or 3 years. And then later, I started to become a consultant, and I did get involved in some of this. But I never knew that cloud that the Earth passed through. No, sorry, I got to tell you just what I know.
Well, thank you very much anyway.
Yeah, I can't tell you that I know, I don't.
Next question.
Hello, I'd like to know if any of the bodies of the extraterrestrial bodies that were found in the crashes were still alive.
I didn't get that either.
Were any of the bodies of EVs still alive in the crashes?
Let me explain that to you. Lately, I was having lunch with my personal doctor. He is working he's an expert on the lymphatic system and others. And I just did this, just put it on paper, and I showed it to everybody. And I partially answered this before. He asked me the same question. He said, Phil, do any of these bodies still exist? I told him, unfortunately, no. He said, why? I told him, we weren't advanced enough to know what propagates this alien being, what makes him survive. Well, once you remove him from the electromagnetic envelope, his environment is gone. He can't propagate. Same with his flying saucer. Same as a human being. Take his nourishment away, extinction, death. He doesn't last long. These EVs don't eat, they don't drink water, they don't breathe oxygen. So they deteriorate fast once you take their nourishment away. His nourishment is the electromagnetic envelope around the flying saucer. The same for the flying saucer. No, there isn't one, unfortunately. They deteriorated fast.
Thank you.
Hello. Over the years, I've familiarized myself a little bit with this information, and according to Project Blue Book, which is a part of Project Grudge, between the years of 1947 and 1953, there were 17 crashes, and 55 alien bodies were recovered, and this was all around the Four Corners area. In 1953 alone, 10 more discs crashed, and they recovered 26 more bodies. And in 1949, 2 discs crashed near Roswell, and of the 5 alien bodies that were on the ship, 1 was found alive and wandering around in the desert. He was codenamed EB, and he was called an extraterrestrial biological entity. He was alive from 1947 until 1952, at which time he died. He had been taken to Los Alamos. Now, all of these, there was such an alien problem at this time that Eisenhower, well, not Eisenhower, it was in 1947 they created the National Security Council to deal with this alien problem, and you said that you served on the National Security Council under the Eisenhower administration. Does any of this information ring a bell?
She's talking about Project Grudge and Project Blue Book,
Yeah.
and how there was an enormous number of aliens reported, some alive, most dead, and an enormous number of ships that had crashed over the years. And being part of NSA, is this something that you recognize?
I had NSA clearance. I had their whole system available to me. As far as NSA getting in the operation of the extraterrestrials and all, no. It wasn't their mission. Their mission was codes, intercepts, and so forth. I used to get their intercepts and codes. I had the clearances. The extraterrestrials and flying saucers was not there. The only thing that I know about NSA in this area, NSA was receiving organized, orderly radio transmissions from space. They weren't space noise, they weren't static. They were organized radio signals. But they were never able to decode them. We don't know where they came from or what they were saying to us. Unfortunately, that's it. They weren't involved. As far as all the information in Blue Book was a poor example of a cover-up. You said Project Grudge. I could very easily name a dozen such projects. I don't know of any that were worth much. A lot of it was just going through the exercises. We never paid any attention to them. People used to ask me, all the UFO sightings, did you ever see a UFO in the air? Did you ever? Oh, no, I'm not interested. UFOs flying around. My interest is what's inside that UFO. If I can't see the inside, I'm not interested. Let them fly around. I've been asked that question. A lot of those sightings that you say was saw, I question them very much. I question most of those. The EB bodies, I question the numbers. I had access to the information. I never knew of that many.
Well,
There weren't more total. I never had information that there were more than 8 or 9 or 10. There weren't the large quantities of bodies. I wish they were available. We didn't have them. The Air Force have them. 1949, Air Force only was in existence 1 year. They were a fledgling service. They had no research. General Twining admitted that. As late as '52, the Air Force research and development wasn't worth much. Neither was the Army research and development. In 1952, Army R&D was under logistics, a secondary mission. That's where I was fortunate. The artifacts that I got, and people don't know this, a CIC man picked them up at Roswell, a Jeep load. The CIC is not an entity in itself that operates. When I had the CIC in Rome, for operation, they're 100% under the G2, the intelligence chief. My CIC in Rome did not operate independently. They were under me. I was the operation man. I called the shots. The CIC, when he got the Jeep, he had to send those artifacts direct to the intelligence service. He was under them for operational control. People don't know this. All CIC is, the Counterintelligence Corps, administration they have. Administratively they have an outfit, but operationally they don't. They're not in the operation business. They're told what to do by the Chief of Intelligence. So that's most of the story on that part. What I think happened, General Twining in 52 said it wasn't worth much, Air Force. They were only 4 years old. They couldn't have created a good research agency in that time. Research a lot of times takes time. You do some research projects that have to be financed 4 or 5 years or longer. A lot of the companies, the big corporations, we were a little concerned because they weren't interested in spending their money on research. All they were interested in was their pocketbooks, because a short-term product improvement pays dividends maybe in 4 or 5 months. Research might not pay off in 10 years. So the board of directors who had all the stocks, they were looking after their pocketbook, the dollar. If they got research money, they didn't get any returns. Product improvement, they made money. But we were concerned about this because the Japanese were creeping ahead of us. Our research was going by the boards. And how I know this, they constantly came to us and wanted research money, and we wouldn't give it to them. And this was constant. They tried to get our research money. They used state-of-the-art as an excuse. They had cost overruns all the time. And as far as Blue Book and all those, I never read that Blue Book. They weren't worth reading. I knew what happened, how it was composed. It wasn't composed on fact by a group of people who weren't trained in the business. They didn't care. All they were told was kill it some way. This Blue Book thing was just one step above the dummy thing that happened last year. It wasn't anything to take serious. We never took it serious. We didn't waste our time with that. We had too many other things to do. And what I'm talking about when I say we, these were the professionals in Army intelligence and the research and development. We had all von Braun's group with us. These Germans were professionals. I have to give them credit for that. They knew their business. I was very fortunate. I had these men on my team. I had the German documents. I couldn't read German, but I had the advantage. I called the German scientists that worked for me and told them to explain stuff to me. The nearest thing to the flying saucer, they actually built one. It crashed. It went up 12,000 feet. And people don't know it. The nearest thing they had, the electromagnetic envelope, was the Foo Fighter. Did you ever hear the Foo Fighter? No. Yeah, a lot of people have heard about it. That's the nearest thing they had. It actually knocked some of our ignition systems out of some of our bombers. They put it in the air. It was a round, it twirled, white, made a luminous light. And that was known as the Foo Fighter. Very fortunate, these advances were coming. They had a tank. They could pick up a tank moving over the Earth's grid system. And by magnetic. They were working on an electronic cannon, electromagnetic cannon. So were we. We made one. I have a picture of one. So what actually the outcome of this was that, and we were very fortunate, General Patton's tanks overran their factories. That killed the Foo Fighter program. They were ahead of us. And other things that they were making. Very fortunate, General Patton moved a little too fast for them. Took their factories and destroyed them. But we never took that on as a serious thing. We should have. And I used to get the documents, the German documents, and have my scientists explain them to me. That gave me a great advantage over things. So a lot of the things that you asked, the numbers and so forth, in my opinion, what I know, weren't so. Take them sort of, well, with tongue-in-cheek. Based on some truth, but the numbers are all different than anything I ever knew. I wish we had that many bodies that we could have worked with. Maybe I wouldn't have made the mistake of not making a project out of it.
Supposedly, in 1954, President Eisenhower met with a group of aliens at Edward Air Force Base. Are you aware of anything like that?
No. Those meetings they say they had with aliens, that's all fiction. I never knew of anything like that happen, or did I ever know of anybody that participated in any such thing. I never knew of anybody that saw a live alien. Unfortunately, all the ones, the autopsy and the ones I saw, they were dead. That put us at great disadvantage. We couldn't examine the way we should an alien brain when he was brain dead. You see how we missed out, didn't get him quick enough. I never saw a photograph or heard anybody tell me that they saw an alien who had a cut or a bruise or bled, or had a scar or caked blood on him. There's never any such report appeared. Nobody ever saw one. They couldn't, they didn't have any blood. So, you see, when you start examining the real facts, the numbers sort of start fading away. Yes, we had some bodies, but not in the numbers that you named. I wish we did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question.
One of the things that we've learned is you were wondering how to fight stupidity, and one of the ways that we've learned is through knowledge and information.
What was that?
And you also said previously that only about 10% of the story has been revealed in your book. When is the other 90%, and how is it going to be disseminated?
He's asking about the other 90% that you mentioned that you hadn't put in your book. Of course, some of that you've given tonight, but
Yeah.
he's asking if there's more.
Yeah, there's more. I didn't write everything in this book. I couldn't have. And I didn't care to. Just recently, my own son criticized me. First, he criticized me. He said, 35 years you didn't even tell your family. So my answer to that is, why should I tell you? Why should I tell anybody? In fact, I'll put it this way. Why should an extraterrestrial talk to me? I build weapons to destroy him. He shouldn't give me anything. Then, just lately, my own son, I told him there are implants in the extraterrestrial's brain. And he said, now I know why you wrote in the book that you discussed with General Trudeau. What happens, what are we unleashing on the world? If this thing, transistor and the integrated circuit, combines with a human brain, are we going to have a race of monsters? He said, well, Phil, I hope that the people come after us recognize the danger, because we really didn't know where this integrated circuit would lead to in the transistor. And he said, but maybe not in our lifetime. And we hope the people come after us recognize the danger. So my son said, you didn't finish that in your book. You knew that it could be done. I told him, yes. He said, why'd you wait till now to say it? Well, tell me why I should have said it before. I'm not obligated to say that. He said, you kept that quiet too. Now I see that you and General Trudeau knew that there was possible to implant these implants in the brain. We saw them under a microscope. Have you ever seen a boat when it gets electrolysis? The electronics jumps from one electronic unit to another, and it makes a thin strand of salt. And every 6 or 8 inches, it has a little bubble. And electricity goes through that on pleasure boats and ruins electronics. It travels over that salt, and it some way it builds up and leaks right to the other electronic instrument. The implants look something like that. Also, there was an implant in the eye. Our probes, our people go in space, send TV pictures back. There was no communication, no such TV on the flying saucer. How did he communicate with his creators? TV pictures went back to them through his eyes, tied in with the nervous system and the spinal system. I discussed this in the thing I just wrote, the nervous system. We know very little about the nervous system. We don't know enough where even scientists can discuss it, how it really operates. We still don't know. We haven't advanced. I tried this out on my doctor, a surgeon. You're right. He said, we don't know enough about the nervous system. So where are we? Where we are, that we missed out on this. This extraterrestrial was the greatest gift given to us. What did we do? Nothing. One autopsy report I saw, one body. What did I do on it? Nothing. When I should have done something. It's a marvelous thing when you see the way the lymphatic system operates. The liquid in there lubricates all our vertebrae. How's it done? He only had one kidney, one lung, because his creators must have decided he doesn't need this for space travel, and they left him out. And even if you read the Sumerian thing in history, the extraterrestrials were experts at DNA. A lot of history writes that they created man. And if you read the Sumerian text, the extraterrestrial is known by the Sumerian as an EGG, I-G-I-G-I. And I interpret that as meaning from one, we make two. From one, two G-I-G-I. And the Sumerians said that they were ferry pilots, is all they were. They were just made to ferry the flying saucer back and forth. Where to, I don't know. Some say the mothership, some say his home base. Other theories are he's a dimensional traveler. He got to know how to withstand the change in dimensions. Possibly true. I've had some good information, talked to some good people about the dimensional and the parallel universe. I think it exists. I think they came through a dimensional gate when they crashed at Roswell. So I know that's going round and round, but these are some of the facts and the question you asked. I can't answer your questions direct because I don't know. So I got to tell you what I know. If you can fit it in, fine. So this is as far as I can go on it. I told you what I know about the body, and I had a hard time lately trying to recollect all I know about it because I read that autopsy report almost 40 years ago. But I think it came out pretty good. At least Jesus thinks I did, and so does Pamela. I showed him the first copy I wrote in my own handwriting. And that EB is a marvelous creation. Not a clone like we talk about. He wasn't created for the future or live forever. He was created for a specific purpose, the pilot of that craft, and to be able to resist and travel in space. Well, I hope I answered you. I don't know if I answered them all, but that's the best I can do for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
My question sort of piggybacks your last statement. We've been working with human health using water and platinum palladium, and I'm quite interested in your comment about the use of water with a perpetual engine for cars. So I think there's a connection there. We've been using the electrolysis using platinum palladium. Has any mention been made in what you know about that and keeping the brain going, which would be very equal to keeping that car engine going?
Yeah. Is this the car?
Yeah, the car that runs on water.
Yeah.
She wants to know how to do it perpetually.
I'll tell you what we did. Harry Diamond Lab in Adelphia, north of Washington, D.C. that made that. I had a photograph of it over in my bag today. I wish I'd have brought it over so I could show it to you. I showed it to Senator Glenn. He had to have that photo. That was what we called fluid hydrodynamics. What we did at Adelphia, we took an integrated circuit, and it was carved out, and in it, in the circuit, we inserted fluid, water, and it ran. It was a pattern, was the electrical integrated circuit. And they made it at Adelphia, and it actually ran. And as I say, I have a picture of it right over in the house here. I had to give Senator Glenn that. So it was a reality, and I told Senator Glenn when he took the picture, Senator, why don't you go up to Adelphia? They might still have it up there. That's north of Washington. It was just a little cart, but it ran on water.
I just want to say it's very nice to meet somebody who's actually had experience in the past by witnessing aliens that have either been deceased or have been still alive, kept in like certain tanks. My question is, before you retired out of the military, have you ever experienced anything like the place is called Area 51 and a special alien underground base called, the place was probably called Groom Lake, Nevada. Also in relation to, as most of the time the earthquakes in California have been in relation to the hovercraft that's been mostly traveling over states that's been causing the tremors for the earthquakes.
He asked you about Area 51 again. He doesn't realize you already covered it. And he then asked about hovercrafts over California. Do they have an effect on causing earthquakes?
No, I don't believe that they have any effect on earthquakes. Now, I've been asked about Area 51 a few times tonight. The reports on Area 51 are out of proportion to what really goes on there. In fact, tonight when we were in supper, I was asked a question which you should know. The installation that you should ask me about is the one at Alice Springs in Australia. We have an installation there. And it's there because that is one of the lowest gravity areas in the world. What are we doing there? Missiles and aircraft. What are we doing at Area 51? The stealth, the B-2. Yes, there's some secrets on the B-2. A friend of mine, editor of Aerospace Magazine, wrote a book on it, is a pilot on the B-2. And I asked him one day, what's up in the front of that? The way the B-2 is at low speeds, it couldn't possibly stay in the air. There's something up in the leading edge that holds it up. And that's why it cost $1 billion to build one of them. The stealth, yes, it's almost radar proof. That is not unusual in this age. Composites do exactly the same thing. My son builds aircrafts which are composite. And he was approached not too long ago by the government people because 2 of these aircraft made a composite, ended up in Mexico. And you know what they're doing? They're flying dope around and the radars can't pick them up. 5,000 feet in the air, you can't even see them anymore. And they came to him with an extra gas tank in the back. And of course he told them that's not unusual. If they fly across the ocean, they put extra gas tanks in. So the stealth technology is not unusual. You see the movies, they make it appear unusual, but it isn't. The only craft that's really unusual is the B-2. The configuration of the B-2, it shouldn't fly, but it does, because there's something in it that keeps it up. And it has to be an anti-gravity device.
All I've known is that they've been creating a lot of black hovercraft, like that's related to the government, pretty much like the bomb.
No, hovercraft cannot create an earthquake. Now, when I came back from Italy, there were some scientists over there, and the UFO came over and they let some rays down, and they analyzed the ground where this ray hit. And I sent it to my scientist friend down in Austin, Texas. I told him he should read that. It had effects on the ground where the rays came out. It hovered in the air, but it didn't cause any damage or earthquakes. Those rays coming out, if you notice a lot of these UFOs, the colors change. That's because the finger control of the aircraft, of the EV, the extraterrestrial entity, comes out in different frequencies. Different frequencies of white turn the colors. That's their propulsion system. It's not that like you read in the papers, the ray came down and turned over a car or picked up a human. I never knew of anything like that. I hope it's right, and I hope someday we advance to that art, but I don't think so. In fact, I tell a little tale about the chapel my soldiers built at Red Canyon disappeared. I figured, did they take it and condense the atoms? You see, we're not that far advanced yet. You're talking of a lot of things that they're conjecture and possibly in the future. And I'd like to see things like that happen, but I don't think so today. I never know of any, and say at the time when I was in charge, we never worked on anything like that. The only rays we worked on were really the laser. We perfected that. So that's the best I can do for you. You're getting into the future. Maybe Spielberg would give you, he puts that in his movies.
Yeah, thank you. I just seen a show on sightings that talked about the black UFO hovercraft going over states and being in relation to why the earthquakes happen. But I didn't know if that was really accurate or inaccurate.
Well, if you talk about hovercraft, one of the most fascinating hovercraft that I know about, I just mentioned it, the Foo Fighter. It did exactly that. Electromagnetically hovered in the air, radio controlled. It chased our bombers. And it hovered. Maybe a lot of these are helicopters. Hovering, yes, we had a toy that the toy store put out. It hovered in the air, and then they took it off of the market. And the Germans had something that would hover, reverse spin of the propellers, opposite spin. That's what the Wankel engine was invented for. You know about the Wankel engine? It was in one of the cars, one of the automobiles had it. The Germans invented that for hovercraft. They wanted to use them during the war. Now, the best hovercraft we have are our helicopters. And I can tell you a story about that. I was given a mission when I was in R&D to check our helicopters. I went down to Texas to look them over for combat. I came up with a recommendation that was not good for combat. It was too fragile a platform, too vulnerable against a major opponent. And of course, I was overruled. So we used them in Vietnam. We used them in Korea, but only as ambulances to transport wounded and such. Worked very well. In Vietnam, we started to use the helicopters in combat. It's a very flimsy platform, unstable. When the pilot is always pulling to the right, it always pulls to the right, and he has to always bring it back. They put rocket pods on, they fail. I was up St. Augustine one day when I was still in the Army, and they put Gatling gun on the helicopter. I told them, what are you going to do, kill the pilot? The Gatling gun, you can't muzzle brake it. They tried it, they fired it, it caved the whole side of the helicopter in. And then when I objected to using the helicopter in combat, you can't give a pilot any protection. Naturally, I was overruled. The first year in the war in Vietnam, we lost 3,000 helicopters. That figure's never been made public. Every year after that, we lost almost 3,000. That helicopter is not built for combat. You can't withstand a major opponent with the type of guns and missiles we have today. I worked on the TOW missile. I even was the first one that brought out, of all things, I had a Swiss film. From that film, we developed spent uranium warheads. It went through 7 inches of armor, 20-millimeter warhead, made out of spent uranium. It sparkled like a sparkler on Halloween, on 4th of July. It went through. So a helicopter up against weapons of that type is like shooting sitting ducks. And it was proven in Vietnam. I think the figure reads in Vietnam that we lost something like 15 or 16,000 helicopters. Just imagine how many men were in there.
Next question. Oh, hi.
Hi. Hey, Colonel, it was so nice meeting you in Florida, and it's really a pleasure to see you again. My question is about the laser you described that cuts in between the cells. That also describes the kind of incisions made in the cattle mutilations. Do you know anything about the cattle mutilations and also the crop circle phenomenon?
Yes.
Asking about the laser that cuts through the cells, very similar to the cattle mutilations, if you could speak to that, and also the crop circles.
Yeah. Have you heard me talk before?
Excuse me?
It's my sister.
I know. That's why I asked her that.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell the people about that. The cattle, I know Linda House, who specialized in the cattle mutilations, the crop circles, and other things of that type. The cattle mutilations are something that we have to think about. They took mostly sex organs, which are nearest to the human. And the big mystery is, what did they do with them? I think we know, but we guessed. Why was there no blood? The extraterrestrial has no blood. Are they experimenting? I don't know. There's a reason for it, though, which we don't know. The laser cutter, I had one. I didn't know what I had, and for a long time I couldn't activate it. 3 laser beams came out. One cut, the other seared, and the one in the middle repelled it made any cells in the body, it repelled them. It didn't cut through cells. So that meant the wound was very fine. Now I'll tell the audience one thing that I learned not too long ago. Dr. Rowe, who was my doctor and operated on my stomach, he was telling me a story one day. He said, in the 1960s, 5 American doctors went to Russia. They took them to a hospital where they were operating, and they had an instrument that was going to remove a lung or something. So the doctors moved back, said this blood will splatter all over.
They can't hear you back there.
Yeah, and the Russian doctor said, oh no, there won't be any blood. So they used an instrument that they went through, cut this thing they were cutting out part of the lung, and it sealed also, and no blood came out, spilled. The doctors wanted the instrument, and the commissar came up and said no. Gave them a story where they got it, which was not true. One of the countries wasn't advanced enough for anything like that. So these doctors went out to one of these shops that sold medical supplies, and they saw one of these, and they brought it to the United States. The Russians sued. The American judge turned them down, so it's being used now. And my doctor, Dr. Rose, said, in fact, Phil, I used that on you. That's how I cut you and sealed your stomach. So now I told him, well, you get me one of those things so when I give a lecture, I can show it to people. We're using it now. And that was something like some of the things I had that I didn't know how they worked, really. And these doctors were surprised at such an instrument. Where did the Russians get it? We think they got it from one of their crashes, because there was crashes in Russia too. Now, one thing that I never told anyone, the German scientist told me, and this friend of mine found out in the book when he went to Russia to talk to KGB general, I gave him a list of questions. He came back, he said he showed the general the questions. He said, I know what you want. And this is in the book, in the photographs. And this general, KGB general said, I know what you want, but what do you want? You want me killed? He said, they'll kill me if I give you this information. I had information even from the Germans that there was a similar unit like we had. One of the enemies of our unit was the shadow government. They didn't like the military, they had destroyed our organization. The German scientists that perfected some of these things didn't like the Nazis, so they didn't give it to them. Same in Russia. I had an approach from the astronaut Popovich, the woman. There was a similar unit in Russia. Didn't trust the communists and had the UFOs. One UFO flew 14 seconds over the base at Bukhanar, the Cosmodrome in Russia. All the towers fell apart. The nuclear binding on all the rivets and welds came apart. The Cosmodrome was shut down for 2 weeks. It must have been electromagnetism, and like Wilbur Smith told me, it destroyed the nuclear binding. And so that's some of the areas that things that happen. This instrument that I had, I talked to doctors about that, and I sent it to Fort Monmouth, which was our electronic labs. I think that it was a surgical instrument. And I think that's what they used. Now, we can't duplicate the cuts that were made in those mutilations. We'd have to use an apparatus that was too big and clumsy and heavy to even begin to cut the way they cut it. Those surgical cuts were beautifully made, and they were sealed, they seared. That was done by a laser cutter. It had to be.
Any idea what they were using the cow genitals for? What kind of research they might be doing?
What were they using the reproductive organs from the cows for? Any idea?
Well, this is my opinion. I discussed it with some of my friends in the military. I think that the master race is sort of a deterioration. Because remember, the Sumerians, 4000 BC, talk about their super race. Well, I do like Pavarotti. I hold a handkerchief. And I think that they're studying these. Not only they cut out sections, but they cut out eyes also and other tissue like that. I think maybe there's been a deterioration in the sick. Now, I write about in this thing I'm just making on the extraterrestrial, that the extraterrestrial has no sex organs. His creator decided He doesn't need them in space. They don't propagate like we do. There's no, said, go out and multiply. They don't multiply by like humans do with sex. Also, in space, it's a distraction. And my doctor agreed with that. So the EB doesn't need any sex organs for his mission. Just like he doesn't need ears and eyes and a nose. He only needs one lung. We have 2 kidneys. He only has 1. So when the creators created them, they knew DNA well enough to leave out the organs that wouldn't tax the brain or weren't needed. And my studies on what I knew, this is true. That's what they did. Now we should study that. What did they leave out? That means it can be, in cloning, it can be left out of a human. But then also, he doesn't eat, no food aboard, no water aboard, no toilet facilities aboard. He doesn't live like on Earth. Even our deep sea fish adopt their environment. So he adopts his environment, which is electromagnetism. So this is what we know about the sex organs. I think their study knows for their purposes, not to clone, but the creators. I think they need something like that. Of course, we don't know now. And people have asked me where'd they come from. I told them, geez, I wish I knew. We had no idea. Who were they?
And the crop circles.
We didn't know. The crop circles, I discussed this with Linda Howes. She wanted to know what I thought the crop circles were. I told them what I think they are, they're messages to us. I told them if some wise, intelligent scientist someday duplicates those and puts them in an integrated circuit, which integrated circuit look like some of them, we will get a message. That is my opinion. The fakers that fake circles, they're just like our debunkers here. They're smart alecks that go out to do that. But some of those circles are real. They were put down there by UFO. Are they sending us a message? I think they are. What is the message? And I talked about the organized radio signals coming from space. They were real. NSA picked them up. But we never were able to decode the message. SETI was trying to get space messages. They never got any. In fact, I think some of these messages and organized messages are the creators or their masters communicating with globe number 1 of the extraterrestrial. We pick them up, but we can't decode them. And NASA's in the decoding business. NSA, I mean. So that's my answer to what they're doing with the crop circles and the mutilations. They're real, this happens. They're doing it. And they're taking them back. Where? I don't know. Maybe they have a mothership someplace. Maybe they have a base on the moon or Mars. I think they do.
Next question. Colonel, I'd like to know about the debris from the wreckage. It wouldn't make sense to me that they would just study it for a couple of years and then kind of just box it away. Are they still studying it today, and where is it? Where is the debris from the spaceship that went down, the metal, everything that they picked up? Where is it stored, and are they doing studies today? I understand that you retired over about 35 years ago, but I'd still like to know if you know what's going on with the technology and the R&D on it today.
Let me tell you something that happened, partial answer on that. I was at Kirkland Air Force Base, book signing on my book. And then we went to the post exchange on the base. And I was sitting at this table, it was low like this. So a colonel walks up to me in uniform, and he kneels down in front of me, and he says, everything that you wrote is true. And then he got up and left. And this was on the base at Kirtland. You know, the B-2s and things are based out there and so on. Then the lieutenant colonel came up, and he said the same thing, and he left. Then the captain came up, and he said, I'm a pilot of a B-2. What you say in the book is true. Then I got a lieutenant came up. 4 officers, within a half hour, came up at Kirtland Air Force to tell me that what was in the book was true. And then a young fellow came up to the table. He was looking at the book. And I asked him, who are you, son? You in the Air Force? He said, yes, sir, I'm an airman, private. I told him, you going to buy the book? He said, well, I'd like to. I told him, look, son, I remember when I was a corporal and a private, I didn't have $2 in my pocket sometime to buy anything. The book's yours, take it. Oh, the boy was happy. And he walked out with a book. So, I say 5 people like that came. And then when I was signing the bookstore in Albuquerque, I had a strange thing happen. There was about, when I got there was about 200 people. In fact, I signed books till 11:30 at night in the bookstore. And while I was signing the book, an old woman come up, nicely dressed, and real neat, nice looking woman, but she must have been in her 70s at least. She came up and she walked up to the table. She didn't get in the line. And she leaned over and said, Colonel, I got up on my sick bed. I had to come here and shake hands with you. So I reached up and hugged her. And all the audience clapped. And then I wrote to Simon & Schuster and told me, get the name of that woman. I want to know who she is so I can write to her. Well, they never did. I lost track of her. But that poor woman, she said she was so interested that she got out of her sick bed to come up there. And then I had some people with young children, about 8 or 9 years old, waiting there. And I figured, why are they waiting here all this time? When the line ended, they were waiting so that the young boys could come up and talk to me. And they waited about 3 hours for that. So this was some of the interest on the book signings. But the biggest thing there was these 4 officers that came up to me and made it a point to come up to me. Now, if it's being hidden or not talked about, they endangered themselves. They could cause them trouble. But they had to tell me this. And I think I know what's in the B-2. Also, it cost $1 billion to build one. That's why it's so expensive. It couldn't fly on its configuration. So somewhere, like Obert said, we've been helped. Some is still going on. But a lot of research, you'd think it would be gone. One day I was talking to the general and something came up. He said, Phil, somebody has surely thought of this. Maybe so, General, but every time I search, and we say this, I search around, I find out nobody's thought of it. And it happened on just what he said. So we surmise that somebody must be working on this. My experience is when you look around, in many cases, that there's nobody working on it. We should be, though. That's why I say this new science. We should create a new science, start from scratch. Not take an airplane and turn it into a spacecraft. You can't do that. It won't work.
Next question.
It's me, Colonel. How are you holding up?
Pretty good. As long as the audience holds up.
What?
I will.
Can I put this down?
Yeah. I won't leave these people as long as they want to ask me questions.
Oh, I think they're running out of gas because they've had a big day and they're going to have a big day tomorrow. I would like to start out by publicly.
I'll be back because today I looked out there.
So will I.
And your people tried to get me to go through those tunnels out there. They even made me climb a ladder, thinking I'd go over the wall there.
Well, the next time you go, you won't be able to climb on top. You have to get in with
And
blindfolds.
I saw all of you in the field out there, and I told the young men I was with, I told them, this reminds me of my soldiers. Only thing, I told them, these people are doing it voluntarily, and a lot of those soldiers, I had to force them to do it. I saw you all going through there. And this thing about, finding the blindfold and finding, that's true. I've had many experiences with, what the mind can do. In fact, I'll tell you a little story how powerful the mind can be. I wrote speeches for Dr. Mayo, Charles Mayo. He was delegate at the United Nations on confessions and bacteriological warfare, and I wrote a speech on the atrocities. So Dr. Mayo gave the speech, and he called me. He said, "What'd you do to me? You handed me this speech." Now, I've had 3,000 requests for 3,000 speaking engagements in every newspaper. You get up here and tell me what I said. So I had to go up there. And then they called him to appear in front of a panel, which was going to work to maybe punish these boys for confessing. So Dr. Mayo said, "Why call me? Call the man down there who wrote the speech and did the research." So they called me. I went over to the Pentagon, and there's an elite delegation there. Admirals, generals, human resources professors, PhDs. So I get up on the podium, and the Air Force had given me 90 prisoners, and I was responsible in Korea for this. So, and I'll show you how the mind works. So I got up to that audience, and I said, I wouldn't take the prosecution job for any amount of money, but I'd take the defense free of charge, because I would try to indict every one of you in this room. You're responsible. You should have known better what the communists would do to these kids, and you didn't teach them. Now, who are you going to punish? You or them?
Colonel?
Yeah.
Colonel? Daisy, you want to ask your question? You're leaving your hostess standing.
Yeah, but I'm going to answer our question on mind control.
Oh, mind control.
Yeah.
Is that what we're getting to
Yes,
here?
that's what I'm getting to. So during the course of compiling all this, when I talk to these people, officers, chaplains, and soldiers and all, that were prisoners, told me that and they were mistreated and all, that when a soldier could will himself to death, when he'd give up, they said if they couldn't get to him, he would lean against the wall, fall, and they could almost name the second he was going to die. He'd will himself to death. And this happened over and over. If they could get to him, they'd try to bring him out of it. They killed themselves with their mind. Now, this actually happened in the prison camps in North Korea. And reliable men, the soldiers themselves who were present, told me this. So I'm telling you this to see what the mind can do. And say, that's extreme. And I was telling her that. So that's the question, the way you have to discipline your minds and what it can do. Because it can do a lot with your mind.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to begin by saying thank you very much for coming. And I already tonight at dinner told you that there are how many billions of people in the world, and that every one of those people have divinity in them, and every one of them have an opportunity to do something great in their life. Unfortunately, very, very few of them ever hear the drum and get up and go beyond their little box and do something wonderful to try to help the world. And I think that your work in writing this book and being so forthcoming, you are one of those individuals that has been preserved has had an enormous amount of experience, and for the reason that you could share it to the world to help relieve people of this stupid guilt that they feel when their government tells them they don't know what they're talking about and they're not really seeing what they're seeing is a sort of a nasty intimidation that people get when they do experience extraordinary. And I feel that you have been given a wonderful life and been exposed to many things so that you could help come out and be one of the many that would say to people, yes, these things really do exist, even though your government since 1947 has been lying to you, and they have. I don't care how you color it, they have. And finally allowing people the freedom to think beyond the boundaries of their own need to survive and their own self-interest. So I want to thank you for your life and for the book that you wrote and for the books that are going to be forthcoming, and your ability to come to people like us and to see, you're not teaching us anything new, Colonel. What you're doing is you're verifying levels of our own experience. So with that, I'm very happy that you came and certainly do want you back. Now, I have a couple of things I want to say to you. It's so interesting about the conversation we're going to begin with tonight about cattle mutilations that was brought up tonight at the dinner table and was also brought up again tonight here. And I found it intriguing, your reply, that that perhaps those creators were taking the sex organs of cattle and of horses, and they were taking part of their lip, their ear, their eye, and I found your answer to be very broad-minded, that maybe they were actually creating from those animals their bodies to be able to live here, a new being. So I just have a cute little thing I want to say about that. If these are the same people that created the EBEs for space travel, certainly have the ability to manipulate the DNA, I don't think that they would really have to mutilate cattle and horses to get their sex organs to create a new being, since they already are creating beings in their own image anyway. And so I feel that maybe there's another side to this. Maybe our consciousness, at least here in the West, is so sexually oriented on one level that maybe they think that in order to come here and to live amongst us, that they've got to have the attitude that a lot of people have, and that is, well, Jesus, if you're going to be Superman, I guess you could borrow a little from a bull, and if you were going to be hung like a horse, and maybe they got us all wrong. Maybe they don't really have to look like that or be like that, and maybe that's part of our own fault of the kind of information and messages that we're sending out. If they have to create a being that is made from animal parts in order to exist here, that may be a very sad commentary on who we are consciously as conscious beings. Now, the other thing I want to say to you is that I myself have experienced UFOs since I can remember, and I've written about them. And I've had tremendous experiences with them all through my life. Since Ramtha has been in my life, I've had several more experiences, and there have been people that have witnessed those craft coming overhead when he said they would come overhead, and some of them are in this audience tonight. And I find that my frustration with the government, I don't think, and it's difficult for me to accept that our government is so disorganized and it was all about funding, that they would perpetrate a very well-organized cover-up that's lasted all of these years. and that even up to modern day, when people are having sightings, for example, the UFO flap that happened in Mexico at the solar eclipse, it was recorded by thousands of people, and yet no one in this government wanted to comment on what that was that all those people were seeing, because you see, forever, including myself, this was always swamp gas, or it was a ball lightning, or it was a weather balloon. And I am ashamed of this government in many ways. I'm ashamed because there are people like myself and many people in this audience who have had the experience of extraordinary life beings that this government has intimidated, harassed, and made their lives miserable, and in many cases, those people have disappeared. So I sort of take issue with this, and I take issue because I have been one of those people, and no one is ever going to tell me that my experiences were in my mind and that I didn't really see those, because I did see them, as well as many people here. And I suppose what this comes down to is, and what I was saying to you earlier, is that I feel that the government has disenfranchised its citizenry. And I feel like that it has, because I know that they know more. I have a difficult time accepting that this was all about budgets. Being disenfranchised by our own government, who has another agenda, and not allowing the people to know the truth. To know the truth can't be that hard. I feel that the experiences that you had were so wonderful and so rich and so much insight. But I also feel that from the time that you went out of the loop, I think that there is a lot that's gone on. And if UFOs, if one faction of them come through corridors, dimensional corridors, low gravity areas, that those that came in were not just exclusive in your lifetime or at those particular times you were working on it. I think that they do it all of the time, and they're appearing everywhere. And I suppose where I'm going with this is that it would be, and maybe this will happen because of your work, that since you were there and you knew all of the answers, I dare say that there have been a lot more incidences since you knew. And I would hope that by virtue of who you are, that it will start opening the floodgate so that the government, by the people and for the people, that this government will finally come out and say, look, we're sorry that we've made you feel so stupid. And we're sorry that we've kept you in a 12-year-old mentality, and we're sorry we harassed you. But in fact, what you've seen is really the truth. And yes, we know there's bases on the moon, and we know that they're flying around in our atmosphere, and hey, we were afraid to tell you because we really don't know what to do about it. I mean, at least that would be impeccable, and it would have integrity to it. And I disagree with you, Colonel, and I disagree because you're right. I never was in the loop, per se, and I didn't have access to documents like you do, and I can't espouse all of the people of importance that you've espoused, but I do have a heavy on my side, and I can tell you that I disagree. I know that there are bases. There are bases in the ocean. There are bases in this country. I know, and I know that our government knows that. And I know that the Europeans know that. And I know that the Russians know that. It doesn't matter what nationality. I know that they're here. And what we don't know is this a pact to improve our world? Like you said, the EB said to you, turn off your radar, and you said, why? What's in it for me? And a new world? Well, I think that maybe what is about to happen is that that's exactly what's going to go on. And I think it would be difficult to bring about a new world without a new consciousness. So I know, and I know that from a place that would be very hard to tell you, but I know that those bases are here. I also know that there have been many people abducted by whoever's doing the abductions, that they also have implants in them. Because my teacher told me that a long time ago, and I'll believe him above anybody else. Now, I hope and desire that while you're out there and you're making this a little bit better to swallow for people, that a lot more of that information will come to you, and perhaps through you, that you can add that knowledge to groups like us, that there is now a current base of technology that we now have. And I now know that we are working on this, and now I know that we do have bases, and now I know that there are aliens walking amongst us. I've been accused of being one myself, you could say. And I think that, and I hope and desire that that manifests for you, because to sit up there and to say, I don't believe it, I never saw it, I didn't know it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I also want to share with the audience, and thanks to you, on those 2 chapters you sent me that you had written many years ago that I got to read, because they confirmed some things that Ramtha said. And I don't know how many people were here when he did the teaching in this arena called Raiders from Above. I don't know. You guys raise your hands. How many of you remember that cloud that stayed over the arena all day long? It didn't go anywhere, and it was the only place there was a cloud. Well, in that talk, he was describing to us these aliens, and he was describing their craft. And one of the things that he said was marvelous, was that some of these have, their craft is actually an extension of their body. It is a part of their body. And that they guide these crafts with their minds. I don't know how many of you remember that. They guide it with their mind. There is no steering wheel. There is no joystick. It's all done through the mind. That it's actually one living organism. They're alive. Now, I'd never heard that and read that since until you verified that in that document. Now, second thing that you verified is that Ramtha's always taught us that we are surrounded by an electromagnetic field, and that really the whole earth is surrounded by an electromagnetic field. So we could then deduce from that that the smallest organisms here also have their electromagnetic field. So in a way, it is important for us as human beings to have that field, because we too would not be able to function without it, because it is integral to the mind that we have. And he taught us that there is a state of mind called analogical mind. And what happens when we reach analogical mind, the bubble of the field that is around us, starts to turn in opposite directions. And as it turns in opposite directions, there is a point of no time, no space, in which we, the human being, are then caught up. Our field changes. He also taught us that the masters who have lived here, who were able to levitate, and that's not just rumor or myth, and it's documented, they have been witnessed, especially in Buddhist temples, that the way that they create the sense of levitation is an anti-gravity field. And what they've actually done is that they have turned the wheel within a wheel around their own body and created an anti-gravity field. and they're actually floating inside of that. Now, this is common knowledge to this school, and it's one of the things that we work upon. And the only way that we're going to have to be able to move from this point to the other side of the moon is when we develop that faculty. And the moment we do, then we will appear on the other side of the moon, just like Van Neumann did, working on the Philadelphia experiment, working with the magnets or the field monitors that allowed that ship to disappear here and then reappear over here. You verified that the UFO that you had knowledge of, not only was it an extension of the EVs who used it from their mind, but also that the UFO itself had around it the same fields that we work on here in the school. And that it is a wheel within a wheel with a center core that is timeless and spaceless. So you verified something that no one else has ever verified. And for that, I am eternally grateful, because it only goes to prove another point for Ramtha. He knows what he's talking about. And furthermore, even if our government, in which I believe Bob Lazar, when he talks about the UFOs that he encountered at Area 51, the Groom Lake area. I believe him, because I've looked at him and I've watched him speak, and I know he's telling the truth. I agree that we have the craft, but I don't agree, and I agree with you, that there's no one here, not even in the US military or the industrial military complex or the secret government, that could even fly the craft that these EVs flew. And why? Because if they have an extra lobe in their brain, that brain was created only as the guidance system and the manipulation system of that craft. Anyone that I know outside of the school that would get into one of those EV crafts and put that headband on and they say, now fly this ship, if they can make it taking off from this end of the field to the other end of the field, maybe they can do it. Because it's going to mean that those people are human beings that got to have an extraordinary focus. That their mind is on the business at hand. And I don't think that there's anybody in this country that has a brain that's that good that could fly those craft anyway. Hopefully, one day, when we get used to going back and forth on this field, and we can guide our own body, then maybe we can guide one of those UFOs. I have wanted to say this and express my feelings because I have had these interactions. And my heart has always gone out to the people in wherever across this country, families that see these extraordinary machines, and then to have their government rebuke them and make fun of them and send disinformation out about them. So I just had to voice that tonight, and in a way, in a great way, you're going to help open the mind and get people to say, wow, I'm not crazy. I did see what I saw, and hopefully one day soon the government will be forthcoming, and to thank you for verifying some things that needed to be verified. That's all.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for being such a great audience tonight. And thank you, Colonel. I think they want you back.